The rocking chair on the porch swayed gently in the autumn breeze. A dried leaf fell silently from the hydrangea bushes. Elizabeth Miller let out a deep sigh as she gazed across her well-maintained front yard. The season of fall colors was approaching once again. I should move the rosemary indoors soon. Adjusting the collar of her light cardigan that wrapped around her petite frame, Elizabeth glanced toward the corner of the garden. The herbs that her husband Thomas had planted 3 years ago were now flourishing. Since his sudden passing from a heart attack, these morning hours spent in the rocking chair had become her daily ritual. At 62, Elizabeth still took pride in her appearance. Her neatly cut short hair, subtle makeup, and elegant J.Crew attire reflected this care. The meticulousness she had developed as a former accountant naturally carried over into her retired life. Back in the living room, the warm morning sunlight illuminated the family photos on the shelf. Her daughter Rachel's smiling face, and next to her, her granddaughter Emily looking cheerful. The two in the photographs looked so happy, and yet Rachel's weekly phone calls lately had seemed somewhat lackluster. Even when she spoke about everyday events in her usual bright voice, there seemed to be a lack of energy. And over the past 2 months, the frequency of calls had noticeably decreased. Call it a mother's intuition. Elizabeth wondered if she was being overly concerned. She had always avoided interfering too much in her daughter's family life. That was a lesson learned from her own relationship with her mother. The twice-monthly visits were still the highlights of her life. Especially the time spent with her 5-year-old granddaughter Emily brought her incomparable joy. "Grandma." Emily would always rush into her arms the moment the door opened. She would show off moves learned in ballet class or play her new piano pieces. Her innocent smile filled Elizabeth's heart with warmth. However, something had been bothering her lately. During a recent iPad video call, Emily had let slip the words, "Daddy's scary." The little girl's expression at that moment haunted Elizabeth's thoughts. Her son-in-law James had initially seemed like an ideal match. After graduating from Boston University, he had built a successful career at a local real estate company, and his devotion to Rachel had been impressive. 5 years into their marriage, they had purchased a home in a new development and appeared to have built a happy family. Lately, though, James had rarely been present during her visits. Rachel would say, "He's busy with work," but Elizabeth couldn't shake the feeling that something else lay behind those words. During lunch at Whole Foods with her book club friends, someone brought up rumors about James. They'd spotted him at a local bar. Elizabeth had quickly changed the subject to avoid further speculation. "All I can do is watch over them." Her close friend Martha from the church reading group had said, "You're worrying too much." Perhaps she was right. At dusk, Elizabeth smoothly pulled her compact SUV into the parking spot. It had become her recent habit to return home before the Instacart grocery delivery arrived. Since living alone, she had made an effort to maintain a regular routine. As she unlocked the front door, she recalled her weekend plans. Saturday would be spent with her daughter's family after church as usual. They had plans to attend Emily's new ballet recital, which the little girl was looking forward to. As night fell, Elizabeth gently touched the family photo in the living room as part of her bedtime routine. In the photo, Rachel wore the happy smile of a newlywed. It pained Elizabeth to think that the sparkle from those days seemed to be gradually fading. Surely I'm just being paranoid. She told herself this as she headed to her bedroom. Yet her maternal instinct seemed to be warning her that something serious was approaching. Bedtime was drawing near. Elizabeth was going through her usual evening routine in the night's stillness. The bedroom lights were dimmed, with only the warm glow of the nightstand lamp illuminating the room. A cold October breeze slipped through a gap in the curtains. Usually, this was when she would drift peacefully to sleep, but tonight she felt unsettled. Earlier in the day, she had tried calling Rachel but couldn't get through. While this wasn't unusual lately, something felt off. Elizabeth sat on the bed, reviewing her call history. Her current book lay by her pillow, the next assignment for her book club. The clock showed 11:15 p.m. Tomorrow was Saturday, and she had promised to attend Emily's ballet recital. She smiled, remembering how proudly the little girl had talked about her new tutu, and how excited she was for her grandmother to come. The notification light on her smartphone blinked blue on the nightstand. Probably a delivery confirmation from Amazon. Just as she reached to check it, her bedside iPad screen suddenly lit up brightly. The ringtone pierced the night's silence. The display showed Emily, and Elizabeth hesitated for a moment. A video call from her granddaughter at this late hour. Something felt wrong. Emily. What's wrong, calling so late? The moment she swiped to answer, Elizabeth's heart froze. The screen showed Emily's face, distorted with tears. Her usually adorable expression was gone, her eyes were swollen, and her cheeks were wet with tears. Her small face appeared pale in the darkness. Her hair was disheveled, and her pajama collar was askew. Grandma. A trembling voice leaked from the speaker. It contained a fear Elizabeth had never heard before. Daddy. Daddy's yelling at Mommy. Help. I'm scared. In the background, she could faintly hear angry shouting. A man's harsh voice she'd never heard before. And mixed with it, a woman's crying. She thought she heard something fall over. Elizabeth's hands shook. On the screen, her granddaughter's shoulders trembled slightly. Emily seemed to be hiding somewhere in the darkness. Emily, where are you now? Is Mommy with you? She tried desperately to maintain her composure, but her voice rose. Various possibilities raced through her mind. James, that once quiet son-in-law, why? I don't know. It's dark. The little girl's voice cut off. There was the sound of a door opening in the background. Then suddenly, the screen went dark. The call had ended. Emily. Emily. She frantically redialed, but there was no answer. She tried Rachel's cell phone next. The call tone rang emptily. Once, twice, 3 times, switching to voicemail. She tried again. Same result. Cold sweat ran down her spine. Stay calm, Elizabeth. Telling herself this, she sprang into action. She threw on a navy coat over her nightgown, stuffed her wallet and smartphone into her bag. No time to check her makeup-free face in the mirror. She grabbed her car keys at the entrance while rushing down the stairs. Outside, the cold night air struck her cheeks. Streetlights cast shadows of the beginning fall foliage onto the sidewalk. The night's silence, usually calming, now felt eerie. The sound of the garage door opening echoed through the quiet residential area. Her hands gripped the steering wheel tightly. The clock showed 11:35 p.m. Usually a 20-minute drive to her daughter's house. No traffic at this hour. Her foot on the accelerator trembled slightly. The seatbelt felt unusually cold against her. Her compact SUV silently cruised through the dark suburban streets. Streetlights regularly pierced the car's interior before fading away. With each flash, Elizabeth's anxiety deepened. When traffic lights turned red, frustration welled up inside her. Please, be safe. Even while waiting for lights to turn green, she checked her phone screen. But there were no calls, no messages, nothing. Her own face reflected in the dark screen seemed pale. At 11:55 p.m., she finally arrived at the new development where Rachel's house stood. The familiar white-walled building loomed faintly in the moonlight. But all the windows were dark. Usually, a small light would be visible in the upstairs children's room at this hour. After parking, only silence greeted her ears as the engine died. She rushed to the entrance and pressed the doorbell. The shrill sound vanished uselessly into the night sky. No response. The entrance was firmly locked. Rachel. Emily. Is anyone there? Her shouts went unanswered. Circling the house, she found no sign of James's car. The neighboring houses had lights on, but their curtains were drawn. No sign that anyone had noticed. Elizabeth's heart pounded. What had just happened in this dark house? And now, where were her daughter and granddaughter? Anxiety enveloped her with the cold night wind. She took out her smartphone again and dialed Rachel's number. The call tone rang emptily before switching to voicemail. Trying desperately to steady her shaking voice, she left a message. Rachel, it's me. I got a call from Emily. I'm in front of your house now. Please call me back right away. Please. Looking up at the building that seemed abandoned in the moonlight, Elizabeth let out a deep sigh. Her reflection wavered uncertainly in the window glass. Even now, at this moment, her daughter and granddaughter might need help somewhere. But in this darkness, there seemed nothing she could do. In the midnight residential area, Elizabeth dialed 911. The dial tone rang ominously in the darkness. 911, emergency response. A calm female operator's voice came through. My granddaughter called. Struggling to control her trembling voice, Elizabeth explained the situation. The video call from her 5-year-old granddaughter, the angry shouting in the background, the sudden call disconnection. And now the dark house. Do you know your family's current whereabouts? No. Neither my daughter nor son-in-law are answering their phones. After a pause, the operator continued. No direct violence has been confirmed at this point, correct? No, but please monitor the situation for 24 hours. In cases of adult disappearance, we can't immediately. The procedural words rang coldly in her ears. Elizabeth stood in front of the dark house, still clutching her phone. I can't just wait. She gripped the steering wheel again. Slowly drove down the street illuminated by streetlights. There was a park in this new development where children played. A place with Emily's favorite playground equipment. Maybe. The park was eerily quiet in the moonlight. A swing creaked softly in the wind. The car's headlights illuminated the playground equipment, but there was no sign of anyone. "Rachel, where are you?" She picked up her smartphone again. Left another message on voicemail. "How many times now?" Her voice was growing hoarse. She parked at a 24-hour CVS. The fluorescent lights inside cast an unnaturally bright glow around. At the entrance, a sleepy clerk was organizing newspapers. "Excuse me." Elizabeth showed a photo from her wallet. Rachel and Emily's smiling faces from last month's birthday. "Have you seen these two?" The clerk shook his head. "Sorry, ma'am." Next was the Starbucks near Whole Foods, where Rachel often went. But it was already closed. Her reflection in the window glass looked somehow aged. The clock had passed 1 a.m. Her phone's battery level sparked new anxiety. She'd left the charger at home. She checked each street in the residential area. Dim lights leaked from the windows of unfamiliar houses. Wouldn't someone notice? Hadn't anyone seen them? Fatigue was setting in. Her limbs felt heavy, and her vision was starting to blur. Further searching might be dangerous. Just as she thought this, something clicked. Could it be home? Yes, they might be heading to her house. Since childhood, Rachel had always returned home when troubled. Elementary school fights, high school heartbreaks, college setbacks. She had shed tears in this mother's house through it all. She turned around. The familiar route felt strangely long tonight. The bands of light and shadow created by streetlights stretched on like a nightmare. 2 a.m. Finally entering her own neighborhood. From a distance, she could make out the outline of her house. And then, under the porch light, two shadows. A woman embracing a small child. Rachel. Emily. Her voice wouldn't come. Tears blurred her vision. She quickly parked and cut the engine. Got out on shaking legs. "Mom." Rachel's voice broke the night's silence. Emily was asleep in her mother's arms. Traces of tears still marked her cheeks. "I'm sorry. I couldn't answer the phone." Cutting off her words, Elizabeth embraced them both. Warmth returned to their cold bodies. The porch light cast their long shadows on the ground. She couldn't ask anything yet. Couldn't say anything. For now, just holding them was enough. All explanations could wait. Right now, she just wanted to savor this moment of relief. In the moonlight, the shadows of 3 generations of women merged into one. The cold night wind gently enveloped them. Steam rose from 3 mugs on the living room table. The warm scent of chamomile tea gradually eased the night's tension. Emily was finally sleeping peacefully in her old room upstairs. The wall clock pointed to 3 a.m. "Can you talk?" Elizabeth gently placed her hand on Rachel's shoulder as she sank into the sofa. Her daughter nodded slightly, wrapping her cold hands around the mug. Her fingertips were still trembling faintly. "James recently made a big mistake at work." Rachel's voice was hoarse. He had lost a major real estate contract, and his sales numbers had plummeted dramatically. The Boston real estate market's downturn was more severe than expected, with new construction sales stagnating. Pressure from the company mounted daily, and their finances gradually tightened. But that happens to everyone, doesn't it? Yet Rachel's words caught in her throat as tears welled up again. James had started stopping by local bars every night. At first, he said it was for work socializing, but gradually he began drinking alone. As he came home later and later, reeking of alcohol, Emily grew increasingly afraid of her father. Tonight was particularly bad. After a major corporate deal negotiation had fallen through beyond repair, James had come home drunk. From the moment he opened the door, his shouting began. "You're holding me back. What good is a stay-at-home mom, even this house's mortgage?" Words that were once filled with love had been twisted by alcohol into verbal abuse. "I knew I had to protect Emily," Rachel continued with a trembling voice. When James drunkenly threw a vase to the floor, Emily ran to her room. Taking advantage of that moment, Rachel quietly packed a bag with essentials for her daughter. Pajamas, change of clothes, and Emily's precious teddy bear. "James had the car keys, but I thought we could walk to Mom's house." They desperately started walking through the residential area at night. Emily silently held her mother's hand, occasionally looking back as they walked. Following moonlit streets with few streetlights. About a 40-minute walk to her mother's house. The cold bit into them. But Emily wanted to call Grandma. When they stopped in the darkness, her daughter took out the iPad. Rachel felt tears well up at Emily's words, "Grandma will help us." However, when they heard James's car engine during the call, they had to quickly end it. "We walked desperately from there, but we must have passed by Mom's car." They hid in the shadows of tree-lined streets several times as cars passed by. Later, they realized one of them had been her mother's car. The two of them, desperately focused on walking forward, hadn't seen who was in the car. "James." Rachel's words trailed off. Elizabeth's smartphone vibrated. An unknown number appeared on the screen. "Hello? Mrs. Miller. This is Officer Johnson from Newton Police." The officer's voice echoed in the quiet living room. James's car had been found in a local bar's parking lot. He was heavily intoxicated inside, and the staff had called the police. "We have him in custody now. Planning to hold him until morning." Elizabeth let out a deep sigh. "Thank you," she said and hung up. "James." Rachel's voice trembled. "I can't go back. Tomorrow, no, today, I'm calling a lawyer right away. First, we'll get a restraining order." "Mom. It's okay now. I'll protect you and Emily, absolutely. This isn't just temporary shelter. We'll follow proper procedures and start a new life." The sun was beginning to rise. Soft light streaming through the window announced the start of a new day. Elizabeth stood up and opened the curtains. The hydrangeas in the front yard sparkled with morning dew. "I'm thinking of looking for part-time work." Rachel's voice carried determination. "Emily's school fees will be needed. Let's think about it slowly here. We have plenty of time." Upstairs, Emily's peaceful breathing could be heard. In what was once Rachel's room, her granddaughter now slept soundly. Thank you, Mom. Strength was gradually returning to Rachel's voice. Indeed, this wasn't the end. It might be the beginning of new challenges. Divorce proceedings, custody issues, financial independence. Many hurdles lay ahead. But they weren't alone anymore. Elizabeth picked up the family photo on the table. An old picture with James smiling. Back then, no one could have predicted this outcome. But life sometimes takes unexpected turns. What matters is the choices we make from there. As the morning sun gently began to illuminate the room, mother and daughter sat quietly together. The clock hands pointed to the start of a new day. And those hands had surely begun marking the first steps toward a new life. 6 months later, on a spring afternoon, new roses were beginning to bloom in Elizabeth's garden. It was a pink variety that Emily had chosen, named Hope. "Grandma, look! There are more buds." Weekend afternoons had become Emily's routine time to help with the garden. At kindergarten, she proudly reported on the growth of the morning glories she was raising. The custody hearings in court had proceeded more smoothly than expected. James's drunk driving record and documentation of that violent night had been decisive. Rachel was granted custody, with James given monthly visitation rights. However, the first 6 months required supervised visits. James had started attending an alcoholism treatment program following that night's events. Weekly counseling and regular AA meetings. "At least he's trying to change," Rachel had quietly remarked. Elizabeth's house had now become home to 3 generations of women. The upstairs guest room became Rachel's room, and her former childhood room became Emily's space. 3 place settings appeared at the breakfast table, and 3 laughing voices echoed at twilight. Rachel had started a part-time job at a local accounting firm, secured through Elizabeth's former connections as an accountant. "I grew up watching Mom's example," Rachel smiled. She was gradually walking the path toward financial independence. During divorce mediation, the issue of house disposal came up. Eventually, after renegotiating with the bank, James took over the mortgage on their new home. In exchange, Rachel secured an increase in child support. "Mom, I got the lead role in the ballet recital." One day, Emily excitedly announced after returning from school. "I told Dad I want him to come see it." The room's atmosphere froze for a moment at those words. But Rachel gently stroked her daughter's head and replied, "Yes. Grandma and I will go watch too." In fact, James was changing bit by bit. He earnestly continued his sobriety program, and progress was visible in his counseling. During visits, he was beginning to show glimpses of the gentle father he once was. While complete restoration might be difficult, a new form of relationship was beginning to take shape. "People can change, can't they?" Elizabeth whispered to her daughter one night. "But just waiting isn't enough. You have to decide to change yourself." Rachel's response carried the strength of experience. The spring breeze carried the scent of new buds. The roses in the garden continued to produce more buds. The 3 women were each walking their new life paths in their own way. Sometimes through tears, but always moving forward. This house now embraced a new form of family. Perhaps not a perfect form. But it had become a place bound by genuine bonds of love and understanding. "Looks like tomorrow will be nice weather too," Elizabeth murmured, looking up at the twilight sky. Yes, surely it will be. Rachel's voice echoed softly. Outside the window, Emily was watering the roses in the garden. Her figure, glowing in the sunset, seemed like a symbol of hope.